All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Mixed Martial Arts. My name is Austin Shaper. Today is going to be a UFC episode. Happy 4th of July, by the way. It is the 4th of July, 10 o'clock in the morning here in Ohio. Looks like it's going to be a beautiful sunny day. I hope you guys have some fun plans. I was a little skeptical that the weather was going to hold out. They kept changing the weather report. It would look like it was going to be sunny, then it went back to rainy. Then last night I was checking it looked like it might rain. But here we are recording the show, and it's completely sunny and looks beautiful out. So hopefully the weather stays good for everybody. I'm going to be going to see Indiana Jones with the family, going to Summit Park here in Cincinnati to watch some fireworks, and just having a good day with friends and family, going to the pool, relaxing. Should be a fun day. I hope you guys are enjoying it as well. It's nice to be off work and get paid for it. That's always a plus. So as far as UFC goes, you guys know I like to hop on here, and this is a segment on the episode or a segment on the show that I really love doing just because the topics that we cover more frequently, the geopolitical World War III theaters and the UFO phenomenon, are heavy topics. There's a lot of serious news going on in both of those fields, and it's a heavy topic with a lot of stuff to discuss, and so I like doing the UFC chats just to add some lightheartedness to the show, I guess you could say. And I am so excited to be doing this episode because it's UFC 290 finally this Saturday. I've been waiting for a good card for quite some time now. I've been watching the ESPN cards, but not in their entirety, and some people may think that's casual, but a lot of the cards just haven't been sparking my interest recently, and I've gone back and watched, quite a few fights on a lot of them, and of course the fights are great. The talent and the UFC is always there, so it's not that. It's just that the cards themselves, as far as like getting excited for them, they've been relatively weak. Before we jump into 290, I am going to cover very briefly the fight night that just happened. I want to cover the main event and the Kevin Lee fight. Starting with Sean Strickland versus Abbas Magomedov. I don't know if I'm pronouncing Abbas's first name. Abbas, don't know, don't care, don't really know much about him. But he was fighting Sean Strickland in the main event. Sean Strickland has the absolute weirdest style I could ever imagine in the UFC. It's so bizarre. I don't know even how to assess it because it's clearly effective. I mean, he TKO'd Abbas in the second round. He was kind of getting whooped on the first round, wasn't he? He was kind of like a deer in headlights. He wasn't really returning. He was taking a lot of shots, a lot of teep kicks from Magomedov, and I guess just getting his bearings. Maybe he's a slow starter. I can't remember off the top of my head if he's always that way, but I know he, even in the Cannonier fight, he kind of just trudges along consistently, and then I think tries to weather an early storm, and sometimes it works in his favor, sometimes it's like a little too late. For example, in the Jared Cannonier fight, it seemed like he was starting to catch up there in the fourth and the fifth, if I recall, but it just wasn't enough. And he puts this consistent pace. It's like he's never turning up the gas all the way, and I don't know, man. It's so weird. It's like he's technical, but he's also not technical. It's very bizarre. I mean, he's constantly throwing the 1-2, doesn't really throw a lot of kicks. He's just an interesting fighter, man. Interesting personality, obviously. But more than that, I'm just talking about his fight style. It is absolutely the weirdest fight style in the UFC. I don't know what to make of it other than it is obviously relatively effective, and it works out for him most of the time. I saw a lot of chatter on, in the UFC world after the fight talking about, Sean Strickland needs to get a title fight now. I think there's a couple of schools of thought about that. One is he's 1-1 in his last two, so I don't know. And I don't know if this is 100% accurate, but I saw somebody say that he's only beat someone in the top 13. So, yeah, I don't see any reason why he deserves a title shot off of that other than two reasons. One, he's really been a team player recently. I mean, he's done three main events just in the past maybe 6 months. I know he closed out 2022. I think he was the UFC's last fight in 2022 and the first. fight in 2023, I believe, main event on both cards. And then obviously he just headlined this one as well. So yeah, he's a company man right now. He's consistently fighting. We love to see that. But that doesn't necessarily merit a title shot. The only thing that I could think to counter that point would be that Izzy has just gone through the division and there's not many other contenders for him to fight. So I guess in that mindset, yes, Sean Strickland could get a title shot. I don't see how that's a fight a lot of people are dying to see. I'm definitely not. I think that you would have to heavily, heavily favor Adesanya in that. I don't even think it would be competitive, to be honest. I think Adesanya would probably get him out in round 1 or round 2. I believe that. I just think there's a world of difference between their styles. And while Sean Strickland is a beast, I mean, there's no denying him. He's amazing, but I just don't think that kind of style is going to hold up against the tip top of the division. I don't think so. Could be wrong, but that's my opinion. It was a good main event. Like I said, it was interesting to see him bounce back so strongly in the second round when he was kind of getting whooped on the first round and not returning any shots and just kind of, trudging down, and then somehow turned it around and got the TKO. So congrats to him. I do want to talk before we jump into 290 about the Kevin Lee fight. He was fighting that Russian guy. I don't know his name, never even heard of him, but I think he was 20-1. So off the bat, why did you do Kevin dirty like that? Maybe Kevin called for this fight. If you guys don't know, Kevin got released from the UFC, what was it, late last year possibly? In the last few months, he got released from the UFC. He went on a bit of a skid. And I always looked at that as a shame because I thought Kevin Lee is a super talented guy and he kind of has the star potential. He's had some crazy fights against Tony Ferguson, Charles Oliveira. He had that crazy head kick knockout against the man's name is escaping me right now. Gillespie or Gregor Gillespie. I don't fucking know, but he head kicked him in one of the best knockouts we've ever seen as of recent. And then he got cut, went on a bit of a skid, bounced back at Eagle FC against Diego Sanchez, which I didn't watch that fight, but I heard it was a bit of a rough decision for him. Not to say that it wasn't justified decision, but just that it showed that he still has holes in his game. So he comes back to the UFC. I don't know why on earth the UFC matches him up with this guy, this Russian guy. I don't know. I immediately was scared when I saw that record and then saw Kevin Lee returning to the UFC. But I was excited because I do enjoy watching him. I think he's a beast, and he's had some good fights. That fight this past Saturday was awful, and if anything, it just shows the dude's got to retire. I mean, it's done. The career's over, and I don't say that to be a hater. I'm not a hater. I think he's incredible, and this is the hardest sport in the world. So, you can't blame somebody for dropping the ball in such a high stakes opportunity. But he didn't even put up a fight, man. It was a little bit pitiful, to be honest. I mean, when he took that, was it right hand that knocked him down? It looked like he was an amateur. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like the Russian guy was doing anything crazy. I mean, he threw I think it was like a 1-2 or maybe just a 2. And Kevin Lee looked like he had never been hit by one of those things in his life and just dropped him like a sack of potatoes. And then, Russian dude got the choke in, and that was all she wrote within under a minute. It was, I'm going to say it's the worst performance I've ever seen of Kevin Lee. And the fact that this was his opportunity to get back in the UFC and show that, he's still got what, he originally had when he came into the UFC, when he was starting to become a, very talked about prospect. Whatever that was, it's not there anymore. I mean, it's just not, and that sucks to probably admit for Kevin himself. But one, the matchmaking, UFC, what the fuck was that about? I don't know why you just threw him to the wolves in his first return fight. Very odd. But at the same time, it was Kevin's chance to prove himself, and he did the exact opposite. If anything, he just proved he needs to retire. But hats off to him. He tried, man. It's a hard sport, and, what can you say, man? It's a dog-eat-dog world. He gave it his all, and he came up short, but it would have been nice to at least see him put up a fight, right? I mean, God, that was awful. I did not think that was going to end in 1 minute. I mean, fucking A, dude. Poor Kevin. So that was the card last weekend. Now we're going to dive into 290. I have a lot going on today, so I'm going to try to keep this relatively short, but oh my goodness, I'm so excited for this card. The cards, as we've been talking about, have been relatively weak this year. It's that thing we talked about. The UFC is like, what's the right thing to do these cards where, every couple months there's a very big card that we're all waiting for, versus it seems like ever since they signed the deal with ESPN, it's like there's a card every Saturday. I think they said there's a card every Saturday for the next 4 months. So that's good, but if you're watering it down and there's like one or two good fights on the card, I don't know, man. I like having UFC every Saturday, don't get me wrong, but when these big cards come around, it reminds me like, damn, dude, it's the sport's changing a little bit. I love having these big cards to look forward to. I don't necessarily love having the card every weekend if it's a weak card. But, I understand people's opinions on that. Some people think, fuck it, we're getting UFC every Saturday and there's always a good main event, so what are we complaining about? That being said, this card is so good, it's crazy. This is my favorite thing in the world. This is why I say UFC is one of my favorite things on planet Earth, definitely my favorite sport. But just one of my favorite topics to discuss overall, because when it's hot, it's really hot. And this weekend we have, let's count them. This is just my own personal preference, but we have the entire main card is fire. Every single fight. You got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 fights in a row I think are going to be absolute bangers. 6 in a row. So that being, we'll start here at the beginning. We'll start at the featured prelim on the ESPN prelims. You got Robbie Lawler versus Nico Price. That's going to be a banger. Hopefully you guys have watched Nico. Obviously everybody has watched Robbie because he's been around for like 150 years. I'm not going to pick on that fight. I honestly have no fucking idea. Both of them seem to be on the downward spiral a little bit in their career, but Robbie is still somehow sticking around. Nico, I believe, lost his last fight. I can't remember because I know he was kind of absent after a little while. He's had some great fights. I think he's the one who did that up kick of James Vick a few years back that was just really impressive. And he's got potential, but for whatever reason, he just can't seem to put it together consistently. I know he's got 9 kids? I forget how many kids, but he's got a ton of kids. So, at least he's getting a payday today, win or lose. As we got Robbie Lawler and Nico Price going into the main card right off the bat. It's going to be great. We got Bo Nickel fighting, don't know who this is, Treason Gore. Don't really care, but we got Bo Nickel coming back. You guys know him. He's the wrestler who had his UFC debut a couple months, kicked the dude in the balls, and then got the submission. I don't know what to make of Bo yet. He's obviously extremely talented as a wrestler, and he's probably going to be a big problem in the middleweight division. But it's too early to say. A lot of these guys come in talking a lot of crap, saying they're going to be champion, this and that and that. And, we'll have to see. We'll just have to see. But I'm excited to see him on the main card. I'm excited to see him make a relatively quick turnaround. So that should be a good fight. I don't know enough about his opponent, Gore, to really make a prediction, but fuck it, I'll say Bo Nickel by submission. Then we got Dan Hooker and Jalen Turner. Dan Hooker is one of my favorite fighters to watch. One of my favorite fights that I've ever seen was Dan Hooker versus Dustin Poirier in the Apex. I think that was during COVID, and there was practically no audience, so you could hear every shot landing, and it was just the most brutal fight you could ever imagine. I love Dan Hooker. I think it's a shame that he gets so close to reaching the top of the 155 division, and then he always seems to get, stumped by the best of them. Obviously, you guys know Michael Chandler debuted in the UFC against Dan Hooker and took him out in, I think, the first round, the first 2 or 3 minutes, if I'm not mistaken. But Dan Hooker's had some wars, man, a lot of wars. Jalen Turner is got the height advantage and the reach advantage. I'm not going to make a prediction on these because it's just such a toss-up. You never know. I would love to see Dan Hooker win, though. I'm just a big fan. But it wouldn't surprise me if Turner gets it. Like I said, he's got the reach. He's lengthy, great striker. So you never know, but let's go for Dan Hooker on that one. You got Robert Whittaker up next against Duplessis. This fight is a very exciting fight because there's a lot on the line. We know that Israel Adesanya wants to fight Duplessis, and he is wanting him to win so that he can get that fight. He obviously doesn't want to have to rematch Rob Whittaker for the 3rd time. And I don't know how much of a hunger there is from the audience to even see that in the first place anyway. The first fight, obviously, when Adesanya won the belt off Whittaker, was not even very competitive. I think he TKO'd him in the second. And then the second fight between them was closer. And Whitaker did have his moments, and I believe it was a decision win by actually, I know it was a decision win by Adesanya. But I didn't think it left anything to be desired for a third fight. It's just another one of those circumstances like Volk versus Max. It's just like there's a little gap between them, and no matter how many times Whitaker fights Adesanya, I think Adesanya is always going to come out on top. So I'm not going to say I'm rooting for Duplessis because I love Whitaker. He's amazing in every regard. And Duplessis, for whatever reason, I mean, he is undefeated in the UFC. He does have 2 losses on his record, but those are pre-UFC. I do like him. He's great, but his style, I just don't see it lasting at the top of the division. I just don't. I think he's a little reckless. He's not very technical, and he gets himself into these sloppy dog fights, like the one he had. Was it against Brunson? I don't know. I'm blanking. I want to say Brunson, but don't mark my words on that. That could be wrong. But he just gets in these sloppy dog fights, and sometimes he comes out on top. Obviously, he's on a tear in the UFC, but that's to say I don't favor him whatsoever against Izzy fight. But we got to see something fresh at the top of the division, right? You know, I don't really want to see a third Whitaker fight. If Whitaker does win, I don't think you can deny him the title shot. You know, I think he deserves it. And there's nobody else for Izzy to fight if Rob wins. So if it has to be done, it has to be done. But as a fan, personally, I think it's more exciting for the UFC fan base to see Duplessis be able to get the title shot. And you never know. Shit, I mean, he could win. You never know. He could beat Izzy. That being said, like, I mean, they fight 100 times. I think that maybe Duplessis wins one of them. Next up, you got Brandon Moreno versus Pantoja. I know these guys fought. This is a championship fight. These guys did fight back in 2018, and Moreno got the decision. I didn't go back and watch it. I just feel like it's so long ago that it barely even matters. It's crazy to say that 2018 is a long time ago, but do the math, man. It's like, 5 years, almost 6 years. So these guys are rematching for the belt. I don't know much about Pantoja's career, so I'm not going to try to sit here and assess it. And as I always tell people, I'm just a fan. I'm not an expert or an authority. I just like talking about it, and it's so much fun to watch. So don't sit here and be like, oh, Austin's going to give us a technical breakdown. He's got to know everything about every single fighter, because I don't. I follow it the best I can. And sometimes fighters just slip through the cracks, and I don't find the flyweight division to be the most exciting. So take that for what you will. I do love Moreno. I am going to obviously be rooting for him because I don't know much about Pantoja, but I do love Brandon Moreno. I think he's incredible, and I would love to see him eventually move up to bantamweight just because I think he's going to run out of people to fight if he keeps winning here at flyweight. So that is the co-main event. Then diving into the main event, the fight that we're obviously the most excited for is Alexander Volkanovski versus Yair Rodriguez for the 145 championship. Yair is currently the interim champion after beating Josh Emmett in what was an amazing, spectacular fight. I went back and rewatched it a few weeks back. Yair might be my favorite fighter as far as his style goes in the UFC. Him and Izzy, I guess. You'd have to duke it out between those two. But I'm going to say Yair right now just because he is so vicious and unique. And as we talked about, I believe, in the last episode, the only knock you can even have on Yair is that he's so inconsistent in his fighting. You just don't get to see him often enough. That's the only really mark on his record you can say, because even when he fought Max Holloway, it was such an amazing fight, and even though he lost, it was one of those fights where you're like, damn, dude, all it did was make me think more of Yair, not less, even though he didn't come home with the victory. Now, it's MMA math is interesting because Yair lost to Max, and Max lost to Volkanovski 3 times. So it's kind of hard to sit here and say Yair has too much of a chance against Volkanovski, right? I don't think that's true. I think that Yair potentially, I'm going to say this. I think Yair actually has the best chance of any of these contenders to beat Volkanovski, even compared to what Max had a chance to beat Volk at 3 times. Because if you think about it, Yair not only has this vicious striking game, and I mean fucking vicious, dude. It's absolutely vicious. On top of that, he's got this crazy submission game, So it's not as if it's not this simple equation where Volkanovski just has to take Yair down and that neutralizes the striking, and that's, his path to victory. Because you take him down and there's a good chance he's going to choke your ass out, just like he did to Josh Emmett. So you do have to favor Volk. I mean, Volk is the pound for pound right now, for a great reason. He went up and fought Islam for the 155 belt in his last fight, and I did watching that live. I did think that Islam lost that fight. I thought Volk won. My buddies that were with me thought the same thing. But that's neither here or there. I'm just saying, Volkanovski is amazing. He does have to be favored. You got to give him that respect. You got to favorite him in this fight. You just have to. He's proven himself time and time again, and he's incredible. But that being said, I think Yair has a huge chance. I really do. I don't know his path to victory. I'm not really smart enough to be able to sit here and break it down. Neither of them have like a clear roadmap to be able to win this fight. I don't know. Let's dive into some reactions because I did see some interesting comments from people who had opinions on this fight and some of the other ones. Let's see. Volkanovski in the cage fighting again. This comes from Matty665 on YouTube. He says, Volk fighting in the octagon again. What a champ. Yet Chimaev hasn't even fought once this year. Good point. Volkanovski has always been consistent. The dude always wants to fight, and as a fan base, we love that. I accidentally cut off this dude when I screenshotted it, so sorry, buddy. I can't see your username. He says Yair will have a good round one, but Volk will adjust, and his feints and footwork will leave Yair confused and unable to get any offensive off. Interesting. Possible. It's kind of hard for me to imagine Yair being frozen. The dude is like always offensively like a Tasmanian devil, so it's kind of hard for me to imagine that he would be stumped by Volk's footwork. But to his point, it does seem like Volk is like amazing at neutralizing whatever the style that is brought against him. He is like amazing at neutralizing it. So it's possible. So he's saying have a good first round. So I think Yair is going to come out the gate hot, but that Volk is going to adjust with feints and footwork. Yeah, I actually do see that as very plausible. I think Yair kind of knows that he probably has to put it on Volkanovski right off the bat on the opening bell, because if you start to let Volk take over, I think turning the tide around in like round 2, 3, 4 is going to be a monstrous task. So I do agree that if he does have a chance, it's going to have to come out the gate and just kind of dominate from the first seconds of the fight. Interesting perspective. We'll have to see. I don't know if Yair is going to be neutralized, but you never know. Joe Valencia 3803 on YouTube says, "Let's go. One of the top 3 pay-per-views of the year, in my opinion." We won't really know that until the fights are completed, but from the perspective of seeing it here and the anticipation, yeah, 100% it's one of the top 3 cards. I mean, as we mentioned, when the entire main card is fire and even 1 or 2 prelims are fire, it's cause for celebration, so I would agree. Top 3, definitely. This hasn't been the strongest year for UFC thus far. Not a weak year, but just not the strongest. So if this card goes off without a hitch and every fight is fire, yeah, it's going to be in the top 3. Slowpoke, what? This is the weirdest name ever. Oh, Slowpoke22 on YouTube says, "I was never a huge fan of Volk." Weird. "But his last few fights have gotten me. Cannot wait. His fight with Islam was some of the best work I've ever watched in the UFC. I'm a fan since '93. I guess that makes sense, because when Volk first started, like before he got the belt, and who did he fight? There were so many fights back in the day. It's kind of hard to remember off the top of my head. But yeah, he had a lot of fights. I think he was winning a few by decision. And while he was always exciting, yeah, I could see how maybe somebody wouldn't be like a massive fan of him. Where he really turned the fire on is when he became champ, right? And then he had the fights against Max, and he had so many good fights that kind of like built his hype right when he became champion. The Ortega fight and just all these amazing fights going up to fight Islam. But it seems to me that, there's a lot of people who kind of warmed up to him once he became champion. He said his fight with Islam was some of the best work I've ever watched. Yeah, I would agree, man. It was a shame. I would have been content with a draw. I think that would have been okay. I did not like to see Islam get the win. When you end a fight on your back and you got knocked down in the last like minute and a half, obviously the UFC doesn't judge it that way. They go round by round, but just from a real life perspective, it's kind of hard to see somebody on their back getting knocked down in the last minute of the last round of a fight and then be like, oh, that's the winner. It's just something that's kind of hard for the fan base to digest naturally. So Jay Castro 9444 says Volk is definitely going to go down as one of the greats. Win or lose, he's a good champion. He's an amazing champion, and I agree. At this point, he's cemented himself in the Hall of Fame no matter what happens. If he gets finished 3 times in a row and retires, still be in the Hall of Fame. I don't think that's going to happen, but Infinity Z Edge says Brandon is the most likable guy in the UFC. I wish him nothing but the best. He seems like such a good dad. Yeah, man, he seems like a great guy. I mean, he's always like smiling. He's always nice to everybody, polite. And then you put him in the octagon, and then he's vicious, man. That's the best combination. That's like the type of guy you want to root for. So I couldn't agree more. Casso Pro says it's officially fight week. Yes, 100%, man. We've been waiting for so long. I feel like I've been looking forward to this card for months and months, and just kind of casually watching the ESPN cards, waiting for this big one. So, yes, couldn't agree more. Officially fight week. Rodriguez and Moreno, definitely the guys I'm cheering for. Viva Mexico. Yeah, man, you could get potentially another Mexican champion off this card. I don't know if that's going to happen. It's too hard to predict with Yair and Volk. I mean, there's just no predicting that. That's not a fight I would bet on unless... I haven't checked out the odds. If Yair is like a heavy underdog, then I think throwing money on Yair would definitely be a smart idea. But if they're relatively even, I would just not put your money in that. But don't listen to me. Body Count 00 says, I know one thing, Volk never disappoints. He never does, man. Even in that loss that he had against Islam, that you cannot call that disappointment, man. If anything, you could say the judges were what was disappointing. But Volk, he never disappoints. He's extremely consistent. It's terrifying. I don't know how these guys prepare for him. I really don't, because I don't see any holes in the game. I don't see any weaknesses. I think that when you rematch him, he just gets better and better. And, obviously if Yair beats Volk, he's going to have to rematch him and beat him again. So... Although it would be interesting, let's just say hypothetically Yair wins and like in dominant fashion. Let's say he finishes Volk in the first round. It wouldn't surprise me if they throw Max up there. I know Max has a fight with Korean Zombie coming up soon, but let's say Max toasts Korean Zombie, and somehow in this universe Yair toasts Volk in the first round. It wouldn't surprise me if they threw Max against Yair for the rematch in there. So you just never know. But I think it's a fair assessment to say what would most likely happen is this is going to be a competitive fight regardless of who wins. And if Yair does pull it off, they're probably going to do an immediate rematch. I think that's a conservative estimate. So, yeah, a lot of great fights, man. I'm so excited for this card. I will be doing a, let's see, what is today? Tuesday. The card is Saturday. So potentially like Monday, I'll be able to come out with another video and we'll talk about the results. I'm sure there's going to be some sort of drama. There always is in the UFC week. I believe they just put out the first embedded either yesterday or this morning, so I'm going to check that out. But wow, what a great card, man. What a great week. Hope you all have a good 4th of July. I'm excited to be able to watch this, and I'll be able to come on here, in the next day or two after the card as quickly as I can and give you my thoughts on everything that took place. So love you guys. Thanks so much for tuning in. Hope you have a good holiday. We'll be back in the next couple of days. I think we're going to do a geopolitical episode and then obviously follow it up with a UAP one. So talk to you guys then. Do me a favor, if you enjoyed the show, hit subscribe on YouTube so we can hit 1,000 subscribers and start doing some live chats. If you follow or listen to this on Spotify podcasts, Apple podcasts, any of that, go ahead and hit a follow for me. I appreciate it. It's 100% free, and it helps me grow the audience of, as I always mention, I'm looking for a very specific audience, am I not? People who are so happen to be interested in both UFC, UAP, and World War III geopolitical stuff. It's a very specific person out there, so you hitting the follow button helps the algorithm maybe show our show to more people. And as I mentioned in every episode, I try to keep them separate so that people who are only interested in maybe UFC don't have to sit there and listen to me babble about aliens or the end of the world, World War III stuff. So I try to keep everything separate, but I'm excited to hit 1,000 subscribers so that we can start going live and doing chats. So love you guys. Peace out. Talk to you soon.